Welcome back to the next installment of Language Labs. This week, we'll be discussing why achieving a C1 on your English exam does not make you a better business negotiator, and how you can get better at being an effective communicator and negotiator. Last time, we talked about the different exams you can take in order to get a certification. Do you remember them? There's four. Think about it. Right. The Cambridge, IELTS, TOEFL, and TOEIC. Many of you might want to take one of these exams to get your dream job or promotion. Some of you just want it because it looks good on a resume, a valid reason. Or maybe you just want to prove to others and to yourself that you truly do have that C1 level. Sometimes having that certificate can really make us feel more confident in our skills. So you take the exam and you ace it. Congratulations. You get the new job or the promotion and you're on cloud nine. But in your first negotiation, everything goes horribly wrong. You can't talk with a client and they end up winning a lot more from the conversation than you do. What happened? Don't you have a C1 level English and a certificate to prove it? Well, there are a few different things that might have gone wrong. Let's break this down, starting with the issue and then move on to how you can resolve it. In a majority of the English exams, their speaking section is broken down into a few different parts. The first one is typically speaking in a social setting. Here, they teach you small talk and ways to introduce yourself at parties or social events. This talk is all about you, yourself, and you. The second part of the exam typically includes a graph or a chart that you need to analyze and then explain in detail, which tests your ability to analyze the information, disagree, agree, and negotiate to come to an agreement at the end. The final part of a speaking exam tests your ability to speak for an extended period of time on any given topic, which could be business related or not. This part checks your ability to think on your feet and how quickly you can develop ideas under pressure. This all sounds great, and it really does help you when it comes to negotiating. But the issue is that these don't test you on your nonverbal skills, a key part of negotiations. They also don't teach you about culture differences, and overall, they only test you in a controlled environment. When we get into real life situations, for example, in a business negotiation, we're not prepared for how others will react or what they will say. It's very, well, unpredictable. In an exam, we can almost predict exactly what they will say to us. We study beforehand, we know what the examiner will ask us, and we can come prepared. Fairly easy. Let's take a second to focus on the nonverbal skills, which can include intonation, body position, facial expressions, and eye contact. Surely, at some point in your English language learning journey, you've talked about intonation and how important it is. Remember in the last webinar when we talked about nuances? Intonation is a part of that, and it's also what we use when we make statements or ask questions. Knowing the difference between I didn't ask you, did I? Versus I didn't ask you, did I? Versus I didn't ask, did I? Can be extremely important, especially when dealing with negotiations. It can tell you a lot about how the person is feeling and what they're thinking. So, what's the difference between those three sentences or those two questions and sentence? Go ahead, try to think it through and decide how they're different. These nuances can be incredibly difficult to understand, but with extra practice, you'll slowly be able to understand how to use them. Last time, we didn't only discuss these types of nuances, but we also discussed words that have a slight difference in meaning. But when you go to use them in any setting, the difference is huge. Let's review. Remember last time when we talked about the difference between words like skyrocketed and increased gradually when we're talking about a chart or a graph? Technically, these words both mean that there is an increase, but one, skyrocketed, means a large increase in one instance, while the other, increased gradually, means a slow increase over time. When it comes to using these words in meetings and negotiations, you have to know the difference. Imagine that you don't explain company statistics correctly, and your boss gets incredibly angry because your budget has skyrocketed instead of gradually increased over time. Do you see the issue? This is why it's important to understand nuances, which is not an easy task, but it's easily doable if you have the time and the practice. You need to understand these differences in order to not accidentally answer a rhetorical question or answer when you're not even the person they're asking the question to. Luckily, we live in a world where technology and AI have great options for you to practice. One way you can start to practice is by watching videos on YouTube. My personal favorite channel is TED Talks, or even if you go to the website TED Ed, it's also a great option. They have a wide variety of topics and it ranges from 5 minutes to 20 minutes or even more. So it really can adjust to your schedule and how you're feeling that day. But there are also plenty of other English teachers on YouTube who cover many different topics, and can give you examples to practice. Another way you can practice is an application called Elsa Speak, which focuses mostly on improving pronunciation, but it also can help you with your intonation. Lastly, apps like Tandem pair you up with native speakers of the language you want to practice. Basically, it's like a language exchange, so you'll practice your language with the other person, and they'll practice theirs with you. When you use resources that help you listen to native speakers, a great way to practice is by using mimicking. Do you know what mimicking is? If not, no worries. Mimicking is the action of when you listen and repeat, like one of those birds, the parrots, right? So listen closely to what the person says and try to mimic their intonation and their words. Even if you personally don't use it in conversation right away, you're at least getting that idea into your brain, which can still help you in the future. Intonation is a great skill to have and can level you up in any sort of business communication. Along with intonation, another skill to add to your list is focusing on body position, facial expressions, and eye contact. Practicing these three skills is not as easy and takes more preparation, as each can vary between cultures. Have you ever been in a meeting with a foreigner and they've reacted completely different to how you or someone in your culture would react? I assume most of you have encountered someone like this. Maybe your conversations tend to be more relaxed and friendly, but the other person does not want anything to do with making relationships, just business. Or maybe you tried to beat around the bush, but someone else got straight to the point. It can really shock you if you're not prepared for it, and that's why you should always prepare yourself before heading into a meeting with foreigners. Let's take a look at an example of a culture difference. You are in a negotiation with a client from Saudi Arabia where confrontation is indirect. You are proposing a potential partnership between your company and theirs when you notice that your client begins to shake their head while staying silent. What do you think is the best way to react? If you chose letter B, you're right. While in some cases, some clients need a more direct approach and will tell you when and why they don't agree with what you're saying, many Arabic clients will expect you to notice their nonverbal cues. So, do you see why it's always important for you to research your client's culture before a meeting? You need to know what to expect and how to react in different situations. If you don't, you can easily lose some great opportunities and connections. Have you already lost some of these opportunities and been put into some awkward situations? Me too. No worries. While it's far from easy, you should take the time to reflect on those situations. What went wrong? Why? How can you change to better react to those situations in the future? Let's take a look at this next article, where people have given tips for how to prepare for an international business meeting. This article focuses more on if you were to go abroad for a meeting, but there are some great tips offered, even if you'll be staying in your home country. One of the most important things to focus on with international clients is keeping your English neutral. While you may have an advanced English level, some clients may only have a B1 or B2 level, meaning they might not understand idioms or slang terms. For example, instead of saying, "It's raining cats and dogs," you should say, "Which one of these responses?" If you chose letter C, you're right. Letter A uses the slang word gosh, and letter B doesn't even have a subject, which makes letter C the perfect option. Letter C uses both proper grammar and neutral English to describe the situation. Anyone with a lower level of English might not understand the idiom or the slang words, but almost anyone with a B1 or a B2 level can deduce the meaning when you use the language in letter C. While it can be difficult to always avoid slang and expressions, do your best to stay neutral for everyone, since surely going into a meeting where you don't understand half of what people say can make you feel anxious, uncomfortable, and unwilling to go back into a meeting like that again. Let's go back to the article for a second. Take a look at it one more time and decide what you think are the most important points to keep in mind. So, now that you've got an idea of how to better prepare for a business meeting, let's talk about different strategies that you can use to help you better your meetings and negotiations. The first thing you can do to help yourself in any meeting is to establish clear objectives, whether they're objectives for the whole group or your personal objectives. Ask yourself two things. Number one, what do I want to accomplish from this meeting? And what are the most important things I or we need to discuss? These questions can help you establish a clear idea of where your meeting is going, and it can stop you from going off track during discussions. If you are leading a meeting, always create a formal agenda to give the meeting members so they have an idea of the day's topic. Also, it helps them to stay on track and not go off track so often. Then, after this, think about your client and other team members that might be there. Think about who is my client or who are the other members and what do I know about them? What is probably their objective? Do we share the same culture, or do I need to prepare myself by reading up on their ideology? Knowing your client before the meeting can help you to prepare for any objections they have to your opinions, which gives you the chance to have a good comeback to any of the issues they bring up, and a better chance to react and not stand there staring like a deer in the headlights. After asking yourself all of these questions, and once you're officially inside the meeting, always remember to be flexible. No one wants to work with a bag of rocks that refuses to budge. In any case, take a look at the following phrases and decide what category they fit into. Is it an introduction? Is it to help with goal setting, giving updates, getting back on track, or is it a closing? How did it go? Pretty easy, right? These phrases can be a great addition to your reading to keep things formal and moving steadily. Practice them and try to use them in your next meeting, and I'm sure it will go great. So, now that we have an idea of how to best develop and run meetings in English, what happens next? No matter if your meeting went great or awful, you should take a few minutes to reflect on what happened. Reflection can be a fantastic tool to use, even if it's somewhat painful to relive the situation. To reflect on your meeting, start by reviewing the agenda one more time. What were the goals of the meeting and what should have been mentioned? Was the agenda clear and concise? And did you go over all of the ideas mentioned? Or did you end up leaving some things out? Now, consider your participation. Did you participate at all in this meeting, or was your participation necessary? If it was, did you participate in every way you should have, or in every way you wanted to? If you didn't participate in everything that you wanted to, what held you back? After this, think about overall communication. How is communication between all parties involved? Did everyone speak clearly about their ideas, or were there misunderstandings? If there were misunderstandings, what caused them? Was it just the English? Was it just a culture difference, or something else? Then, review the decisions that were made. Did everything come out the way you hoped it would? If it didn't, why not? Was it a communication issue, or did you come to a mutual agreement on the decision? Lastly, take all of this information and identify your strengths and areas for improvement. What, out of all of these things, went the best? Write them down. Now, think about what, out of all of these things, went the worst, and write those down on a separate list. Try to keep these lists somewhere close to you as a constant reminder of things that you need to practice in the future or things that you already do well, to not always make yourself feel bad and give yourself something to feel good about. You don't have to practice everything all at once, but try setting small goals that are easily achievable. In the United States, we use a framework called the SMART goals. SMART goals, or SMART, is the acronym here, each letter meaning that it stands for something else. So let's talk about that. The letter S in SMART stands for specific, which means make your goal specific. Think about what is it exactly that you want to do. Don't say something general like, for example, I want to lose weight. Be specific. What is it or how much do you want to lose? And this is just an example, okay? M stands for measurable. Try to find a way to measure your progress. With English, that can be in recordings that you use maybe once per week, once every other week, or even once per month or more, so that you can see your improvement over time. Sometimes it's really difficult to see that improvement if we're going through it every single day. But when you can compare one time far in the past to one time in the present, it makes it a lot easier to notice how far you've come since you were or where you were in the past. And then A stands for achievable. We can't do everything at once. So start small and make it something that you know you can achieve. R stands for relevant. Your SMART goals will add up to be one big objective in the end. So make sure your goals follow a certain path and are not random and don't really contribute to the end product. Lastly, T stands for time bound. Give yourself a reasonable time limit to complete your goal. Can you complete it in 1 week, 2, or more? Decide the time that you need to get better and stick to it. Try to use this framework to start helping you build your goals, which can help you become a better communicator and negotiator in meetings. So, to sum up, having a C1 level according to an exam is really just that, only according to the exam. Mostly, you don't need to take the exam unless your work asks for it or it's a requirement. But really, most of what you need when it comes to achieving a C1 is practice, whether that's practice through setting a SMART goal, practice through talking with a native speaker, or practice through just watching videos and trying to mimic what you hear. The real test at the end comes once you're inside of a meeting. But to truly be ready for those tough meetings and negotiations, you have to prepare beforehand. Think about the type of people you'll be with. Try to notice the nonverbal communication and decide the best route to take in responding to it. And overall, have a good outline of how your meeting needs to go so you don't lose track of your goals. Doing business in English may seem like a piece of cake, but in reality, it's a lot tougher than it sounds. Practice prepping for those meetings, reflect afterwards, and keep working towards being the best negotiator and speaker out there. To help you out, I've left you with a form to fill out. I want you to think about a time when you had a meeting in English, or if you haven't had one, use a story from a friend. Think about what went well and what went wrong in the meeting, and what can you take away and use or change in the future. Use the questions on the form to guide you, and be honest. You won't get any better in meetings if you aren't truly honest about how things went. Good luck out there, and I'll see you next time. Bye.